You spoke about the female being more present in this exhibition. I know we talked a bit about this in preparing for the talk, but I want to know how you feel in the midst of these works. You know, as you are installing the exhibition, how do you feel about the female presence in this body of work and in your practice in this moment?
I feel good.
You feel good?
I feel great, actually.
Do you feel it's a new direction in your work, or do you feel it's confined to this exhibition? Do you have ideas about how gender is balanced or imbalanced in the presentations of your?
No. I didn't think about a gender balance because even if you look at the show, there is no. I mean, there's hardly any. The only male figure is not even here now. You know, but just one. You know, so I really didn't. I didn't think about gender balance. I'm careful with those things.
Okay, because I know I feel looking back to your exhibition, the forms I heard.
Yes.
And the doors. I mean, some of the casts of the figures are so deformed that you couldn't really tell. You know how they. You just know that they're people.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, in thinking about your practice and thinking about community, it really wasn't until this exhibition that I began to think about gender. You know, even though others may have said, oh, there were more men present in earlier bodies of work, I never thought about that until this exhibition where there were so many women, which prompted me to ask you, you know, about how that came to be.
And like I said again, I think it was my wife who called me once and said, you don't make you don't make women. You just make one woman. So I thought about it, I said, I don't have anything against the female figure. You know what I mean, if you study sculpture, most of the forms you're going to be studying, playing with, is supposed to be the female figure because of the nature of the forms, the curves, so you should, sculptors make a lot of female forms. So it's natural that you should be pulled towards that perspective. But I think for some interesting reasons, I've just So when I haven't listened to that enough, I felt it's time to make it work. Even this Halo series actually started as male figures. They didn't start as female figures. The first ones I made were males. I think there's one I donated to Yabatek, the museum. It's a male figure, bust, and that was one of the first ones. So they started as males as well. But then upon pushing, the body of work, then I started, interrogating the idea itself to say, what really makes you a saint? What does it really mean to be a saint? And then in my summation, I realized that to an extent, to a very good extent, that the roles women play in society are very saintly, but they are not considered as saintly roles. So I wanted to use this series to highlight that, to say, I'm not like saying that they are saints, but I'm not talking about them as like females are saints, but I'm saying that the roles and their contribution, could pass off as saintly, and so I decided to now switch the males.
Can I ask you about the specific roles you're thinking about? Can you delve into that a bit more? Which roles do you feel you've observed in your environment, in your life, that you consider saint?
Okay, let's say Obama says, if you want to build a community, empower a woman. So during his own tenure, he made certain funds, and went around, creating these, funds and spaces and opportunities for females and female entrepreneurs. And why? Because he felt that, in his summation, that when you empower a woman, it trickles down into the home, that it trickles down into the community, because then she takes it because of the way they use their resources. It's not like the men don't use it properly, but the way they spend theirs is different again. So he felt that it was an opportunity to tap into that, to reach a wider group, and I felt that, just looking at it from that perspective, I think that bonding, in the way they relate with people, in the way they try to bring people together and bring things together, it's quite interesting. Not everybody would do this every time. But there's almost like a natural instinct to do that, probably because they are privileged to be the ones who bring children to the world and all of that. So they have that natural instinct to try to create that space, And I think that it's something to tap into, like he tried to do. So I think maybe just from that, moving on.
When you talk about how resources flow through a community, it reminds me of shall we call it a residency or the, let's say, project that we did in 2011,
okay.
A Kilo of Hope.
Oh, yes.
And I remember then, we all had our different reasons for being at that landfill. And you were very keen to observe how materials were moving through that community, and that micro community of Lagos.
Yeah.
Could you share a bit with us about that experience and about how that experience impacted your work?
And so I must thank Jalili again for initiating that and for pulling all the resources and make that happen, because it took a lot to be able to achieve that project, even with the limited resources he had. I think that being in that landfill and watch how objects, how things that are not considered to be, like again, I think about it and I think about this work I made, Growing from a Strange Place. I think about how those guys go into the town, collect those discarded objects, like broken down doors, broken down lanterns, they just collect everything that is broken. And then they bring them to that landfill. Yeah. I mean, I went back with Mr. Dekola and it wasn't like that anymore.
Really? What was it like? When did you go back?
We went back, so I can't remember exactly. We went back some years after. But it wasn't, and we were not happy at all.
Wow. So what happened to all of our friends? They were not there. What happened?
Well, it's changed, because I don't know, for some interesting reasons, those circle of, movement and activities were not as again, then it's also being cleared, so I think they were now clearing it up for something else. I don't know how it is now, but then it wasn't as, it was very busy there.
Yes.
And so you see trucks coming to load the waste. Now you don't have all of that anymore. Now you have more ramps, ram settlements and people selling. There were cows there before, but now you have more ramps. So, but I like that. I like the fact that you be on your street and you see the bowler, which is the name we call those guys who move those things. You just see them moving the doors and moving these objects, and they buy it from me. They buy it from me sometimes. My empty Tina container, paint, they buy it from me. They go on with magnets, they pick things around. Then they take it to this. So I really wanted, so when I got to that, I really understood how those things, so it was interesting for me because I just see them move around the streets. You think these guys are stupid. But so they get to this landfill and then they sell it to their friends, and their friends scale it. They scale it and then they will sell it to people who will melt it. They sell it to all these companies who make reinforced steel, like twisted rods. Because I later realized that that's what most of them end up as. End up as twisted rods. So they make it, they send it to them. Those guys come, load in trucks, go back, they melt it, and they make it into twisted rod. I was going to make a project because I was taking photographs, I was doing drawings, but it didn't pan out, so I just left it. But it was interesting to see how these people you think, they're really not contributing to society, are really adding up to GDP in very interesting ways. Clearing, first of all, there are environmental issues. They are assisting in doing that without dragging any rain or creating any dust. They're just doing it.
Yes.
And within every community, there's a dump site. I don't know how it is on the island, but on the mainland, mostly there's always this yard where they come together and they sell those things. So it's from there, these things move. I think that, and then you later realize that the government is very aware of what they do, and they support them in their own ways. Yeah. So there are a lot of things that you are not really aware of, but it's important to understand how, because again, my work is about people, the spaces they occupy, and how spaces are reimagined with the use of objects. And so these are all the things that I look at, because I want to understand how those spaces are reimagined and how they are contributing to how those spaces are reimagined. And I was interested to see how that worked.
Thank you very much. So I think those are my questions for now.
All right.
I don't know if do we have questions are we taking questions from the audience? Hi, Tai.
I think I want to ask you.
Any questions? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said there is a shift from using male figures to using female figures. And to an extent, it took your attention. So now, more of your work embodies the female essence. And if you look at what's happening in society, there's this, like he quote, he said, Obama said that if you want to build a community, you empower the woman. With that, would you, looking at what constitutes a woman, the agreeableness of a woman, the soft part of it, that can seemingly make a society very, very lovely. Then look at the men that, to an extent, we are disagreeable. Not because we do not want things to happen the way they should, but because that constitutes our mental alertness, the strictness, and so on and so forth. And there's been a kind of shift from attention from the male to the female. Or I would say there is a kind of battle, or what should constitute the dominant hierarchy in society. This may be subtle or less pronounced. But coming to your work, I mean, having been overly concentrated on the male figure for a period of years, and there is a sudden shift, would you say that, for me, I have two boys, would you say, which are also very different arguments, and I'm digging up from some things I've read, would you say, because, would there be a time whereby we now begin to negotiate the focus from the girls' reports, and we can begin to say, we want to, because somehow there is a kind of marginalization also. Because when you focus on a particular group, you kind of also blow out the other side. So there are some research that has been said whereby there are professions in which men for long time have constituted the majority. It's now declining in terms of mathematics, and so on and so forth. So the females are out there, not because they are not meant to be out there, but because when you concentrate with blood, not because the other person is also not useful. So should I have to, at a point in time, begin to teach my children that for you to kind of be accepted by society, I now begin to teach them the soft part of the feminine side, neglecting the assertiveness of man. Because the world, as we know, is an embodiment of the positive and the negative. I'm not saying that me as negative. It's the kind of contrary. I'm moving between ambiguities. I'm not saying the female is negative, neither is it, but you have two opposing figures, and the two opposing figures actually have to work together to make life bearable. So are you saying now that you are blowing out the men from your work? I'm not saying that I'm only alluding that you are blowing out the men. That also kind of is a metaphor to what's happening in society, whereby people have to confront me. Someone once told me, you don't paint females. I was like, why should I paint females? So how do you see, how do we negotiate from here, if you are conscious of that?
Like I said, gender-based. I try not to touch those things because I don't know. People that I talk to about my work to very well know that it's a struggle to get me to talk about what I'm doing because I don't want to get caught up in these things. But I'll tell you one thing for sure with leadership that I think I know about. I believe about leadership. It's who the cap fits. All right. For me, we all cannot have the same strengths. We cannot have the same weaknesses. There are women that do things that if I see it. I mean, some of my favorite artists are women, and if I see the kind of work they do, I would always proudly tell people, I saw Doris Arceldo's retrospective. I would say it everywhere, because that was somebody I think I spoke to you about in Trinidad. I like her work, and if you study her work, you would know that that doesn't mean that she's better than all the other. I mean, I like Iwiwi, I like many other male, artists, but they all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses, they have their perspective towards things, and I think what I believe with these kind of things is that at least give people an opportunity to bring their opinions to the table. The best wins. Doesn't have, whether it's a male point, whether it's a female point, they win. And that those things doesn't have to be considered based on gender. Today, I'm having this exhibition. I'm happy about it. And it's a woman that owns the space. She's showing it. And she's showing it in the best of ways. And I'm very excited about that. So am I going to say because it's not owned by a man, then I will not. Whatever she says, Richardson, this is how we want to show it. Oh, that's fine. Why? Because I'm not banking on she's a female. I'm banking on her expertise. I'm banking on her experience and her wealth of knowledge that she's bringing to this project. And I'm very careful, and I'm learning from it because she knows tons of things I have no idea about. So if you meet a man who can offer you the same perspective, oh yeah, I'll take it. But today she is the one offering me, so I'll take it. And that's how I like to perceive and view things. I think it's more holistic. I mean, I might be wrong, but I hope I answered the question.
Richardson, thank you for sharing. I've known your work for a while, and I'm seeing something new that I would like to ask you about. I think we're familiar with your motifs, the switches, the shelves
Yeah.
of the houses, the wheels, the lanterns. But I see that you're actually, especially with the houses, you're approaching the sculpture in a modular sense, and you're introducing rhythm.
Okay.
And I wonder if the introduction of movement and rhythm is intentional, and if it is, what you are trying to say.
Movement and rhythm. Yeah. I was speaking to somebody at the opening of the show, and I said, as an artist, it's always very difficult for me to make work in series. It was very boring, to be honest. So, but I got to a point, and I think I began to suffer from it. Why? Because again, when you're making object-based work, you are pulling your works into a system where you have a lot of people who are also making things with objects as well, and it's easy to think that you're copying them. So the only way to beat that is probably to now create these modulars, which now makes it more related to you. So people can look at the object and say, oh, this is more like this is more okay, this Richardson, because you've been able to spend some time doing that. Now, so I had to outgrow that idea that it was boring, and and say that, look, it might seem like it's boring to you, but it might just be indisciplined. So maybe you just need to be a bit more disciplined in your approach to this thing, and you might just be ignorant as well. On the feeling that, because in the short term it might pay off, because it's like one-off brilliant idea, but then when your work is paced, it's put as a body of work, then it becomes problematic. Why? Because it's like this guy is making a better version of everybody's work. That's how almost like a speaker house for. So I now began to learn how to spend more time doing work in series. It's more difficult for me because I'm growing, I'm learning it. So I now have to spend more time because I do a lot of drawings, and the drawings I do, I really don't show my drawings. So I do a lot of drawings, and a lot of those drawings now are trying to restrict me to make them in modulars and to create that rhythm, to create that process. So it's quite intentional now. Unlike before. That's why, like a show like this, you would see, like you see 4 heads like this. Normally, probably you will have just seen maybe just one. So it's like I have ideas in my head. I just put one. I just put another one, so but now I'm trying to create that's it. So you have that strict discipline. You can take one, you can stretch it. How long can you stretch it for? And that's why I've stuck with making those houses and stacking them. It's not very easy, but I'm doing it because again I understood that it's beating me, very well over time, and I had to pull myself to learn from that process. So I think it's part of growing up, though, as an artist. And thanks to you, sir. So it's. I guess you were one of those who called me to it. People always call me for things.
Fantastic. Any other questions from the audience?
Again, this is very, for me, this kind of knowledge is very important. I never knew much about your work until I came here about a month ago. So a few that were on display, and I'm now seeing quite a bit. My question, takes off from what Ebilah was asking me about, whether you first think in terms of concept before you think in terms of how the aesthetics will be. So now that you've gotten to the handle stage, how did you determine, for example, what part of the female form you choose? And I'm not into politics of gender because I know that women are already fairly well represented in the art.
Yes.
So it's not, but I'm just trying to figure out because I mean your work's very, is that sort of thoughtful thing that the audience will have to derive their own meanings. It's not that sort of work that comes across like a marketplace sort of thing that you say, well, this is it. So what I'm trying to find out from you is when you get, when you begin to explore themes like, hello, what do we expect next? How do you determine, the next thing you do? Do you already have stuff that you are working on and you just come with the next exhibition and show a series of things? Is that the way you work?
No, I don't show my work every exhibition. I mean, I have works I make. I show them sometimes here. I show them sometimes some other places. Already, what I learned over time is that whatever I want to talk about is already in it. Whatever my subject matter is already in my heart. Whether I decide to be conscious about it or not, is there. I have things that I may not be conscious about them now, but they are there. And when I want to do anything, they play out. So they're in my subconscious. They're there. They play out. So I for example, these halos, for example, I'm not going to think about them. They're already a running theme in my head. So what I'm thinking next is, how next is the next one going to be? Now, when you talk about the forms, which forms I chose to do, one of my practice, I've always been very interested in the heads, human heads. For, I don't know, maybe just as a student, maybe because we made more portraitures with clay, I don't know, but whatever. I just know that I've always been interested in the head as a form. And then, because again, I've always met people like Mr. Olu Amoda, people like BC Silva, who's always going to try to tell you, please look, you have to put these things in context, contextualize it. So I've always been also, in my own little way, drawn to reading. And in one of my earlier readings, I stumbled on Professor Babatunde Lawal's text on the head, the importance of head in traditional Yoruba sculptures. And it's deepened my interest in the heads. I think that grounded my essence of why I must continue to use the heads. Because now it becomes like, it's very important. The head is a big deal. Not just as a form, but what it means, the intentionality of that space within the human body. If you read Professor Babatunde's Lawal, he wrote a lot about it. If you read it, you will love the head and you will respect it a lot, So I'm from that perspective, I keep using it. But with this series, what I realized when I was going to be making these female heads was that I always like to look back at what has happened before me and see what I can learn from them. So I look at a lot of traditional sculptures. To make these heads, I wanted to simplify them, to say I was not going to put too much forms, but I also wanted to reference them in a way that they had that historical underpinning. Mm-hmm. So I looked at Ife heads, and I looked at the scarifications on the Ife face. Mm-hmm. And so the scarifications are referrals of like those on the Ife heads. Now they were not done. I'm not doing them exactly like that, but I'm just trying to put them there as a way to memorabilia for me to say this is coming from somewhere, mm-hmm. And this is where it's coming from. And so every time I remember it, I'm reminded of the roots of where this idea is coming from. And again, halo traditionally is about the head. It's a thing around your head. From all the paintings, it's always around your head. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that within the Nigerian context or the African context that the head is just important. I think, in other cultures, the head is also a big deal. So that's why I have so much interest in the head. I have interest in other parts of the body, like the leg, like I mentioned to you earlier. The leg, shoes, because I don't like to say this out because we are in a time where people are trying to create generics for their work and put new words out there and to say almost like create a movement. I'm not trying to create a movement. I'm not, but I think that to be able to again create this rhythm and create this these modulars for myself, I have to create a strict protocol for my discipline. So I work within that parameter. So I call these objects of transit. Why? Because that is how it helps. That helps me select the object. So if I'm touching an object, I'm asking myself, how is this helping me? How is this helping me transit anything? So if I'm touching a lantern, it's helping me transit space in terms of light. If you're in darkness, you put on a light, the space changes. Tap, because that flow. If you're looking at the shoes, movement. If you're looking at the legs, movement. So all of these things, in a way, key into that idea of. And I've used these objects, the wheels, consistently because they fit into that narrative. Other objects will show up over time. I don't know them now, but over time I will keep picking them up. But again, I will try to. I'm not trying to restrict myself to the use of objects. But again, I'm just trying to show you what my thought process are now. They can change, but for now, that's what it is, and that's like a guiding light for me right now. I hope it helps. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very. Are there any more questions before we?
I've got a question.
Sure, go ahead. From your Halo series to the piece, The Cross Took Me for a Walk.
Yeah.
I noticed some obviously clear religious themes, and I think that a lot of us, while we're growing up or while we are figuring ourselves out as adults, we are stuck in a place where we're trying to figure out what religion means to us in our past, especially as Africans, from our past, present, and future. So I'm wondering if your maybe, I don't want to say battle because that's such a negative word, but maybe a come to Jesus moment of realizing what religion might mean to you, had any say in you working on those on those themes coming up as inspiration to you?
So when I was going to do this show, unlike the other shows, like I said, I always took a third-party perspective to it. But this time I want to take it from my own personal experience with space. So these works are very personal to me. It's like this time my own interpretation of what's happening in society, straight out from me. So to do that, I felt that the only way to be able to achieve that was to look at, the way I've always done it, is to look at different part of the society and then take that into cognizance and see how I could interpret them through my work and make that kind of statement. So if you say the halos and the cross took me for a walk have religious underpinnings, very correct, because that was my own take on religion. Now, I was questioning the idea of what does it mean to be a saint? What are the things that constitute saintliness or sainthood or whatever, What are those things? What are those things that a person must have for him to be a saint? So those were, because again, you can just be a saint and to the next guy you're just a criminal because you don't have any, So how do you come to that point where everybody accepts that this person is a saint. What does the person need to have? It's not about whether whoever calls you a saint is right or wrong, but I'm just asking those questions. And again, art doesn't need to solve all the, give you all the answers, but it can ask questions, and it can create platforms at which you can, drive and then, begin to come into those spaces where you can learn and solve those problems. So art decision doesn't always come with the answer straight out every time like that. The cross took me for a walk. It's a reference to one of a piece I saw with Kainebi. I worked in the Kainebi studio earlier in my practice as well. One of my first exhibition, the door I made has a painting on it. And the painting on that door is actually from this same theme. Cross took me for a walk. It's just, I just like the title. So I like the title first. And then again, I begin to understand what, thinking about it, growing up, thinking about it from a religious perspective. What does it mean for a cross to take you take you on a walk? That's quite, it's very interesting for me. So I wanted to reimagine that title again. So I made this work. And then I'm thinking about my own life as a person, and I'm asking that there are times where I've been through some very deep things, and I'm asking myself that, is this a test of to see how much trust I have in God, or is it to test to see if, just testing my trust, my idea of trust in what I propose I believe in, So I think that at those points, they were like the cross were taking me for a walk, just to see, let's go. Let's see how far you can go with this thing, and what are the lessons you can learn from it. Yeah. So you're right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Richardson, for
Thank you.
all you've shared. I know you don't share often, so we are grateful.
Thank you for getting me to talk to you.
We are grateful, and thank you again to Bloom Art for organizing, initiating, and hosting this talk today.
Thank you so much, Daria.
Thank you. Thank you.